Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, football season is back. We've had some good comics coming out lately. How you doing, sir?
I got my Raiders cap on. I'm woefully optimistic.
Hopefully optimistic. Yeah. I got Raiders shirt. My wife likes the Raiders, so I'm wearing Raiders for her. My Bears won, so that's a miracle that they started 1-0.
Well, I wish I could say the same for my Raiders.
It's a long season. I'm sure the Bears will lose plenty and the Raiders will win a
Yeah, but
few
it's
games.
that first game, like it's 50-50. When you're a Raiders fan or maybe a Cowboys fan, that first game can really kind of keep your hopes alive,
Keep your hopes alive for a few weeks. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in the back of your mind, the mid-season, your chances are just gonna
Just
be
taking a
down in the
dive.
dumps. But if that first game is a victory, you can kind of like ride this little gentle wave of, hey, there's hope. There's
A
some
little
wind in the
hope and
sails.
optimism. Yeah.
And not so much for this year for Raiders fans. So we
We shall see. Hopefully it's a good season for both of us. Optimism and hope. We talked a little bit about it there. Nice segue by you to get us into our topic for today.
Big
Uh,
Blue back there,
Big
the
Blue
man.
Superman.
Yeah,
What we wanted to talk about today, comic books in terms of the modern age. One of the things that we see people talk about a lot, and this has occurred to you and me a lot, is the notion of heroism. I think when you go back and you look at the foundations of these characters, while there are certainly social issues they tackle, while there are certainly things that, they would deal with issues in an issue or two here or there, for the most part, the big two superheroes were pretty straightforward, clear cut superhero, good guy, does good things because he's a good person. And that's kind of the be all end all of the stories. I think as we got into the 80s, we started getting a lot darker with the stories, stuff like Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, all of that, and the notion of deconstruction of superheroes and things. And I think what we're seeing is that has been revisited over the last couple of decades and has caused a lot of damage to comic books in the minds of a lot of people. So, for you, do you think that modern writers struggle to write these classic superhero characters in the heroic mold that they used to be because they're too busy deconstructing the heroes? Or what is your thought about how they present heroes or heroism now in comic books?
I believe in cycles. I think that it's time to make that turn to writing those more hopeful and aspirational stories. And I think, this dark plunge into deconstructionism and darkness and doom and gloom is going to come to an end. And, the writer, I'll tell you this, the writers that pick up the hopeful aspirational nature of all these great characters and starts really hammering that home is going to find a lot of success in the industry because I do believe the readers are ready for it. There's only so much dark, depressing Superman or strange adventures of Spider-Man. When we just know, he's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. We just want to see him, swinging on his web, saving the day, and not so much everyone's got to beat up on Peter Parker or Superman's an evil dictator or those stories have run their course, and the writers that pick up on that and really move the ball forward into the next phase, coming around to a cycle, are really going to be on the leading edge of the next trend of these heroes that will push them into the future. That's how I
No,
think.
I think there's three real things that stand out to me with comic books now when I read kind of modern heroes. I think one, there is a tendency to believe that the old school notion that a hero is just a hero. A lot of our modern writers seem to treat that like that's really naive or stupid. And I think one of the things is when you look at the creation of these characters, while certainly they tackled social issues and things at times, I mean, Captain America punching Hitler on the first issue of Captain America, we look at it now and go, man, that's an awesome intro. At that time, that was an inherently political statement, and that the U.S. was, I think, a year and a half or almost 2 years away from being in World War II at that time. Superman in his early appearances tackles a lot of kind of landlord type folks and people who are oppressing people and corrupt business guys. I think there's always an element of realism to comic books, but what I think it has evolved into is, while yes, there's some formative stories, for the most part, comic books were told in a very simple: Batman's the good guy, Joker's the bad guy. Batman goes and stops the bad guy. What we're obsessed with now is this idea that, like, we can't just have that story. It's got to be, well, Joker's a mentally ill person and Batman's a one percenter. So is it okay that a rich white 1% guy is punching a mentally ill person like the Joker? And that, instead of being, hey, there's some subtext, has become like the thing that people most want to explore in these stories,
Are they
right?
really going after Batman like that right now?
No, there's always a critique of Batman, of why doesn't he just donate his money to Gotham City and rebuild the city instead of punching people? And again, I think there
Then
is
you
some
wouldn't have a comic book, guys. You wouldn't have a
yeah.
comic.
The thing is, there is some analysis that you can do of some of these characters. But I think one of the sillier things that we've done in this effort to try to evolve the medium to grow with people, and I think kind of leave kids behind, we treat the old school stories of Captain America is just going to see a bank robber throw his shield and knock the guy out. And that can be a satisfying adventure, is a naive and childish notion. And instead, we need to deeply explore Steve Rogers dissecting the complicated, terrible past of some secretive society in the American history and all this. And it's, look, there's a place for those stories. There absolutely is. But we've gone so much towards the only angle that writers want to explore is this like deep psychological analysis of all of the characters, that we've left behind the fact that these are superheroes. These are guys in colorful costumes stopping bad guys, saving the day, saving the girl. And it doesn't really need to be more complicated than that. And while, yes, you can have a story now and then that dives into that, I think what's happening, because we're so focused on that all the time now,
It's
it's
so
kind of like
funny.
it's just evolved into a darker place than it needed to be. Go ahead, Mike.
It's so funny that you mentioned some of those plot points because those are like all the crazy plot points that go on in these indie series of, these indie comics, with, brand new characters. They go on and dive into these social issues and mental health. And I think, what was that other one? It was really kind of dark but fanciful. It was not Alice in Wonderland, Alice in Neverland or something. And she was mentally ill and she had imagined all of these adventures, or maybe it was, part of her drug addiction. But it was interesting, but do we need to put Wonder Woman into that? Do we need to drag Daredevil along? I don't know. I just think I'm thinking cycles, right? In the beginning, everybody was fighting the war in the comics. I mean, that was prevalent. It picked up on that social issue and it drove comics for 5 years, the golden age of comics. And then the war ended and comics went really dark. We went into horror, suspense, crime, and all of this stuff really picked up steam in the late 40s and into the 50s. And then everybody, came back and the superheroes were reinvented in the 60s with, some more adult themes, but still, and some moral questions to be sure, certainly like the X-Men, um, and but brought it into a fanciful fantasy light. And now we've gone dark for like 20 years, 30 years. Going, we got to come back to the light, guys. We got to come back to the light. And yeah, we just I think it's destined to happen. If you want to go dark and explore, this is fantasy, guys. This is like our escape. We want to see, ridiculous costumes, but somebody saving the day. And we want, our heroes to be aspirational. We don't want to delve too much into their mental,
Mental
status,
health, the psyche, all that.
the
And again,
psyche. We don't want to put them too much on a psychoanalyst chair. There may be an issue or two for that. There was that famous one with Spider-Man where he sees the psychiatrist, and but then the next issue, it's right back to Doc Ock and Green Goblin, and we're good to go.
Yeah, I think the thing is we've become obsessed with what if the hero existed in the real world? And it's like that's not what look, if any of these characters existed in the real world, they'd be hunted down by the US military or whatever country's military they lived in. And even we wouldn't be fans of these people. If
Yeah.
anyone walked outside and saw a guy in a spider costume perched on your roof, you'd be freaked out. If there was some giant guy in a bat costume hanging off gargoyles downtown and swooping down, people would be terrified of that person. Superman would be terrifying in real life. He could be the nicest guy ever. The second you would see a regular man like
Yeah.
lifting a boat over his head, the world would be freaked out. And it's why it doesn't work is that we're trying to drag our world into these fantasy worlds. And the thing is, you can drag elements of it. You can have an issue now and then that touches on a real world subject. And there's been runs that have done that beautifully. X-Men has done that beautifully at times. Captain America has done that well at times. But the thing is, it kind of reminds me of like older sitcoms that used to be on TV. I grew up watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and like Family Matters and a lot of those shows like that. One of the greatest things that those shows did, majority of the time, standard sitcom, funny, ridiculous plot. You love the characters, you laugh, you have fun. And then about once or twice a season, there'd be an episode that would be
The
like
very special
the
episode.
very special episode, right? And like
Yeah.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air will get shot. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa, what is, and those stood out to you because it's like, man, most of the time we're throwing jazz out of the house and laughing at Uncle Phil or whatever. And now Will got shot, or like, Will's dad shows up and leaves. And it's like you'd have these episodes where you're like, but those really hit
Yeah.
because you had so much fun and you had so much love and you had so much affinity for the characters. You look at the comic book version of that. If you read the first, 100 something issues of Spider-Man, Peter Parker, very standard adventures. Yeah, he's a teenager. Yeah, pays bills, girls, all that stuff. But by the time they get to that issue, I was it one something, 105, 118, something like that, where Harry Osborn deals with drugs, right?
Yeah.
That hits different because you're so invested in this world. And that message resonates so much more because you got standard Spidey adventure, standard Spidey adventure, standard Spidey adventure. And then it's like, whoa, what happened here? And it hits because these characters that you love have something at stake that's real. What we've got to now is every issue is this on a very special episode. It's not a very special episode anymore. It'd be if every episode of the Fresh Prince had Will getting shot or someone's dying or something like that. And I think that's what we've got to with comic books is X-Men, I think, has been the worst one of this. Black Panther's been another one where instead of just letting these characters exist and be who they are, we keep wanting to drag in real world stuff into these things. And it doesn't work because you can't compare like X-Men. I always know people try to compare X-Men to like oppressed peoples, right? Marginalized groups, however you want to phrase it. There's no guy with claws who's immortal in any of the groups in real life. They
Yeah.
can't shoot laser beams. You can integrate some of the stuff into the story to give it a little context and layering. But when you try too hard to drag 2024 into an X-Men comic book, you get something that makes no sense because you look at it and it's like, this doesn't work for this. Like one of the biggest examples I saw this that just the cover made me laugh hysterically. In the John Kent Superman comic book, they wanted to do an issue about global warming and climate change. And so on the cover, he's, leading a protest or something like that. And someone has a sign saying there is no planet B. I'm like, guys, this is the DC universe where there's 36 different multiversal planets that exist.
There's a
You literally
planet
had, I think,
Z.
in the comics, someone
Yeah.
from an alternate universe in a different planet, and John Kent is half Kryptonian at the scene.
He's
And
from
again,
another planet.
it's
Yeah.
not that you can't do a climate change issue in a comic book and do it well. It's that when it's in the DC universe, when we know there's 57 different multiverses,
Yeah.
this is not the most well thought out plot point to go through, right? And that's, I think we've seen the same thing with Black Panther.
I just
There has
wonder
been this.
what modern
Go ahead.
creators are padding their resume for indie comics, where that would be like a typical line of an indie comic with an enchanted,
Yeah.
tree who's trying to fight back. you
Well,
know,
no, and we've seen this like the way
uh,
that they have treated T'Challa in comic books. It became, I want to say 2017, the movie came out. They finally relaunched the series. It's like we're getting Black Panther again in comic book form. It's really exciting. The entire series from that point has basically been, well, there can't be a higher, it can't be, a kingdom anymore. You can't be a king. It's got to be a democracy. So T'Challa can't be king anymore. We need to have a democracy. We need to have votes. We need to have elections. He can't be on the throne anymore. The entire thing has been this, like, we've got to throw out the monarchy thing. And it's like, no, he's King T'Challa.
yeah,
That's part of who he is.
yeah,
Like the same way Aquaman is the king of Atlantis and Namor is the king of Atlantis in his thing. There's a
yeah.
couple characters who are kings. You don't need to analyze, well, should there be elections in Wakanda and stuff like that? Like it's, then
It's
again, could you do it?
Wakanda. It's
Could
a
you do an
fiction.
issue about that? Could you have where T'Challa has someone debate that with him? And after 20 issues of awesome adventure with T'Challa, where he's saving people and looking awesome, you have that issue? Probably. But instead, it's like, nope, we're just going to make the whole darn run about this. And I think it's not that you can't integrate real world issues. Comic books have always done that. Captain America's had times where he dealt with what was going on in the United States. There's even been times where he's taken off the letter A off his thing and said, I think he had one where he's Nomad or
Oh
just the
yeah,
captain instead of Captain America. And
right.
those are classic stories. Superman, early issues, all that stuff. You can do it, but it's few and far between. You need 20, 30 good issues of Black Panther just saving the day or Cap saving the day. And then you do that storyline.
Because then you have a really special issue, like a very special episode.
Yeah.
Other than that, if it's just, I don't know. I love comics because they are fantasy. It's tough to live in the real world. Sometimes, and every once in a while, I like my fantasy to go someplace where it makes me think. Like, for example, I'm rereading Dune right now, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, all Herbert takes you to where you think, yeah,
A lot of conceptual ideas and things to
right,
balance.
right, and but anyway, it's fantasy, it's escapism, and it runs in cycles, and I really feel that the doom and gloom, dark stuff has really fully been explored. I now give you the reins to trod fresh ground or retrod some really good ground that has been trod before, and it's very easygoing. And like I said, and like you said, those one-off issues, what makes them special is they went there for a minute, and then they got you back to
Your
your
regularly
fantasy.
scheduled programming. Yeah, I
Exactly.
think it's the same. I've always kind of looked at this. It's interesting because there's always this nerd debate on Star Wars and Star Trek and what's better. And for me,
Oh,
what's
wait a
interesting
minute.
is
Wait
I
a
know
minute.
where you side on that.
Wait a
I've
minute.
never actually seen a comparison between the two because Star Trek, from its inception, was a show that was designed to challenge you in terms of what's the right and wrong thing. So many episodes, there is a scenario presented, and the entire quandary is how did this group of professionals and people who know what they're doing in this militaristic kind of structure that they have there, how do they decide whether this is the right decision, the wrong decision, and what to do? Star Wars has always been straightforward. There is the light side and there is the dark side. There
Right.
is no moral quandary when Luke Skywalker goes to face Darth Vader and the Emperor in terms of who's really the good guy here. What's happened is Star Wars has tried to become more like Star Trek, and I think this is where you've seen so many Star Wars fans kind of rebel in
Yeah.
terms of you've had people where, oh, we want to explore, are the Jedi actually the good guys? And it's like, no, as this is presented, is the Sith is bad, the Jedi are good. And I feel like comic books was a lot more like Star Wars, especially the big two, than it was Star Trek. Batman's the
Remember,
good guy.
remember, remember Phil Harvey in SNL?
Mhm.
Yeah. Jedi good, Sith bad. Yeah. That's the beauty of Star Wars, you know.
It's very
Cut and dry.
simplistic.
Yeah,
And again, you can have villains who are layered. Darth Vader's a tragic figure as Anakin Skywalker, but he's still a bad guy. I
yeah,
think comic books, the big two especially, you had your Punishers and you had your Wolverines that were a little more edgy, and you could debate whether they were good or bad. But there was never oh, is Batman really good for what he's doing? Of course he is. He's swooping down and saving people's lives every day. This was never supposed to be, is he really doing the right thing by saving people? Right. And it's like, we've taken this to a level that it doesn't need to be. These heroes are heroes, the villains are villains. And yeah, every once in a while you get a Killing Joke, or you get a Watchmen, or a Dark Knight Returns, or a Civil War comic book that makes you go, who's in the right, who's in the wrong? But that's the special episode or the special issue.
right.
I think the other thing that's happened, last thing we'll get to, I think one of the things that's happened is
By the
I
way, I
do
just gotta
think
say, we were talking about Darth Vader and
Mhm.
James Earl Jones
James Earl Jones,
passed
rest in
away
peace,
this
man.
week. Yeah,
One of the great actors, and my gosh, the most distinguished voice of all time. I think I've had like 10 years of listening to James Earl Jones read the New Testament on CD in my car. Just listen to that.
just
Absolute legend, man. Um,
absolute
no,
amazing
it's so
talent.
sad to see he passed. Yeah, last thing we'll get to. I think one of the other little struggles, and this is something I've seen in our comments and I've seen from a lot of people on chat boards for years in terms of comic books. Do modern writers struggle to write the characters as they are because they're too busy making the characters more like themselves? And here's what I would say. I think sometimes what we have now is, instead of the writer going, okay, I'm writing Batman or I'm writing Nightwing, Batman's morality is this. And so I will write the comic from Batman's point of view. Instead, it is, well, for Batman to be a hero, he needs to be exactly like me. So what I think is good and what I disagree with is bad. And so the hero, to be heroic, basically better have the same political beliefs that I have, the social beliefs that I have, the religious beliefs that I have. And essentially, the only way for him to be a hero is if he basically is exactly my morality. And anybody who disagrees with any facet of my morality is a villain. And I think we have seen that in comics. I don't know if you've seen that. I have seen a lot of feedback with that. Do you think that happens a lot with the big two now, where you kind of read that into things?
I think that I think I'll stick to my original statement, and I think that modern writers do their apprenticeship at the big two with, and this is just how I feel. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
No,
think
I got
they,
you. Yeah, we're
I,
just
I think
expressing opinions. We're
I
not
it seems to
making thesis
me
statements.
it seems to me like they may be like, just trying, and I've seen it happen so many times. They come up in the big two, and then but their ultimate design is to get into the indies where they might get paid a little bit more and be able to branch out and really stretch their writers' legs. The world of comics, as it was initially constructed and how it existed for 60 years, it could be sort of limiting. If you're a creative writer, you've got this expansive, list of stories to tell and this amazing amount of creativity. Um, you can bring it, but the mark of a good writer, I mean, you're rewriting fiction. It's like somebody who has to take over the reins of Ian Fleming, when
Yeah,
he
for James
passed
Bond.
away,
Yeah,
or Frank Herbert. You have to step into these shoes, and TV writers do it all the time. Look at all the writers that have worked on Doctor Who over the years. TV writers have to do it all the time. But you really, to be good and to shine, you have to be like James Earl Jones. You step into your characters with the role that you're given, and you perform in those boundaries to your best ability. When you're given these properties that are 60, 80 years old, you have to write and see things from Bruce Wayne's perspective, for it to be believable and truly be a good story. You can't write a story from your perspective as Batman because you're not Batman, and
yeah,
you are Bill Finger. You have to write those stories from that perspective. And that's what actors do. You have a role, it's already written for you. You have creative license to act your role a little bit this way and a little bit that way and bring your emphasis to it. But there are boundaries to that character. The director's going to say, no, 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 do it this way. And I think that's one of your main complaints is the editors who are the directors of these pieces aren't really doing
Should
that.
be should be telling them, no, 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 it
Yeah,
doesn't work that way. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's gone too far in terms of like again, I'm not a writer. I'll never write a comic book or a book. I just don't have the wherewithal to go through and do storytelling. So I do have a certain respect for people who do stories, but I look at it and it's like if someone told me, "Hey, Reed, you're writing a Batman comic book." Okay, well, for me personally, I'm a married father of multiple kids. I'm a Christian, and that's the most important part of my life. If you made me write Bruce Wayne, he's not married, doesn't have kids really. He has one kid, I guess, and religion not really a huge part of Batman's life. If I started writing Batman, all of a sudden, married kids becomes a Christian, and every issue is about those three things, it would be like, Reed, that's not Batman, that's you. Why are you that? And people, rightfully so, I would be one of the first ones in line going, what the heck is this writer doing? I don't care that he's more like me now. That's not Bruce Wayne. I'm a
right.
fan of who Bruce Wayne is. And I think we've seen that
Exactly.
now. There are certain writers in the comic book industry. I'm not going to call out people by name and stuff like that to just be rude, but there's certain writers that I think almost everybody knows as soon as they start writing a character, that character is going to change. That character's due to have their personality change. They're going to be inherently a little bit different. Their political view, their worldview is all of a sudden going to echo the writers, and it's exhausting because part of why we love this world is these characters typically have set personalities that make it so fun, right?
And
When you throw
then you see these like massive changes go for these like short arcs,
short
and
arcs,
you're left with like what the heck just happened to my favorite character. But in reality, that storyline could have worked perfectly in a short one indie series, and the writer probably could have got paid more, and he could have wrote a different character and just really explored those ideas. It would have been published in 6 issue indie series. It would have been great fodder for that. But to shoehorn it into a superhero comic, it is really, it
no,
doesn't ring
it's
true.
one of the things now where that storytelling mechanism, you can tell they just don't feel like doing the character work sometimes. Like I look at what happened with Spider-Man recently. We did a video on this, but just they had where Spider-Man's about to get engaged to Mary Jane. And then we do this lazy thing we always do 6 months later, and everything's different. And in 2 years, we might tell you how we got there. And the whole thing is,
He's
they
still
could have
going on
broken,
about that Spider-Man story.
they
It
could
really
have. Well, here's the thing.
stuck.
This is why it makes me mad. I'm not even necessarily mad at the story direction that it took. I'm mad at the laziness of 6 months later. And then, hey, buy 40 issues and then we might tell you what happened. You know what would have been interesting is if they would have had us end up in the place that we are, but we took 2 years to tell that story. Because one of
Yeah,
the things that happened is MJ was supposed to be isolated in this place for a really long time. And she was supposed to build a bond with this different character over years. The whole thing that we did is instead it was just like, nope, one issue, all of that happened. And it's because you could tell they didn't feel like doing the work to build that relationship where it's like, you know what? If you had really taken 25 to 30 issues and you've had, well, we're going to explore this and we're going to look at what's happening in
that's a
issue
meaty
one,
story for a
that
comic.
could have
Yeah,
gone. And again, would people have loved it?
we
Probably not.
loved it. Well, I
But the
mean,
thing is,
we
we
love the
could have
stories that
probably
have the
gotten to a
legs.
place where we go, you know what? It makes sense. You could have had where MJ's working with this other character that she leaves Peter for, and you see that he's a good guy and that he's helping, and you see how that built. Instead, 6 months later, everything's different. Maybe 45 issues from now in a $7.99 overpriced issue, we'll give you half an explanation of what happened. And that's the thing
Or
that we do
not.
too much of is we'll have stuff happen now where it's like in one issue, one line of dialogue happens. And then all of a sudden, that character, the rest of their trajectory is just off that one line. Like they make a statement, and it's like all of a sudden, that's the defining thing about this character, despite the fact that, like, for 40 years, that character hasn't acted that way or been that way or done that. And it's just, we've got to get back to a place, I think, where the writers go for the long form storytelling, but also understand that, look, like you said, as an actor, it's your job to write that character. When you write Clark Kent, you don't write Reed's Clark Kent. You don't write Mike's Clark Kent. You write Clark Kent. And
To the
Reed and
best of your
Mike's
ability.
job, if we were writing that, is to put Clark Kent in a scenario that fits for him and challenges him, instead of going, well, I don't like Superman's personality, so I'm basically just going to make him me and
Yeah.
have me be Superman. That's bad writing, and that's why people don't like it.
Well,
But
the perfect example of that is what you've got going on at Amazon with the boys. That's somebody who didn't like Superman.
yep,
Or what's that other one with Omni Man?
Invincible. No, and that's the
Invincible.
best point that we can kind of close
No,
it out in this. Look, for these
I mean,
writers, if you truly want to write an examination of, is a guy who's rich like Batman beating up on criminals who typically have mental issues in Gotham a good storyline, or is Batman bad or good? Go write an indie book. But when people are reading Batman, I'm not sitting there going, geez, is it really right for Batman to stop the Riddler when the Riddler might have an undiagnosed medical condition? Like, no, the Riddler has a person off a building and he's trying to kill them. I'm
yeah,
I'm reading this to see if Batman will stop that and save the day, not, geez, if I really psychologically analyze, is Batman the healthiest way for an 8-year-old boy to deal with the post-traumatic stress of his parents' murder? And does it make him like, again, can you do an issue on that? Sure. But the majority of the time, I want to see Bruce Wayne in his freaking armored up Batman costume jump in the Batmobile, use some batarangs and knock the Riddler out. I don't
yeah.
really need the whole, geez, Riddler had an undiagnosed case of ADHD as a child. And man, if Bruce Wayne had just funded public medicine more, maybe this would have, like,
Oh
that's
my
not what
God.
this is. And I think we've just got to get back to, these are heroes.
Yeah,
These are villains. There's nothing childish or stupid about it. And honestly, even if you do see that as childish, doesn't really matter. That's why these were created. These are colorful characters in costumes who punch bad guys. And yes, there's more depth to it than that, but at the end of the day, it's kind of that simple. The
yeah.
Flash is the good guy, the reverse Flash is the bad guy. Those are the rules, and we just kind of go from there. I just hope we can get back to that. But
Yeah.
as always, folks, let us know what you guys think below. Do you think we've gotten away from writing heroes? Do you think there's too much real world stuff going into these comics? It is always so much fun for us to see what you guys have to think. Again, we will never pretend we're the experts. If you guys have a differing view than us, we'd love to see it down below. Even if you think we're 100% wrong, that is completely okay.
Yeah.
We love seeing your guys' opinions. It's great to see that. We want to have this be a place where you can comment and share what you think below. We always enjoy that. So let us know what you think, folks.
One of my
As
best friends,
mhm,
he, he loves that kind of stuff in the comics. That's why he buys them every month. So I know what you mean. But yeah, as
absolutely.
always, thanks for watching, everybody.
God bless you. Have a great week, folks. Let us know what you think.